Hey, everybody. Welcome back to Great Mondays Radio. Today, Ossa Fisher from Aurora Innovations is with us. She is the president of this autonomous vehicle driving company, which is a big deal across the country. 1,800 employees, 9 locations, founded in 2017. And as we start to see autonomous vehicles become a thing, I thought this would be a really interesting time to talk about scaling an organization, and Hannah Osa is, as the president, looking at scaling the understanding or figuring out how to understand the sentiment of all those employees. So there's just a big growth period and a growth opportunity. So Osa, welcome to Great Mondays Radio. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So let's start with Aurora Innovations. Probably not maybe at some point a household brand name, but not quite yet. Can you describe a little bit about what Aurora Innovations does?
Yeah, Aurora's mission is to bring the benefits of self-driving technology to the world safely, quickly, and broadly. That the order of those words, safely, quickly, and broadly, is no mistake. We put safety first in everything we do, and it
Mhm.
is what drives us. We do have autonomous vehicles on the roads today in Texas, which is where I'm based. We're up and down the I-45 corridor, Dallas to Houston, and also from El Paso to Fort Worth every single day. So already hauling freight for some of the largest providers out there, FedEx, Uber Freight, Werner and Schneider, and are very excited for what's to come.
Right. Well, I was going to say the first thing I see on the website is the freight, is the semis, which is a great use case for self-driving vehicles. So that's really where we're starting to see Aurora play. And there's opportunities. The technology, the software, and the hardware. Your plan is not just to do freight, but that's where you're starting. Is that correct?
That's correct, right? The Aurora Driver can fit on multiple platforms. We're starting with trucks, but we also have a partnership with Toyota for passenger cars.
Very cool. So, great. So now we have that's the stage. This is an incredibly exciting area and a growing area, which means that your organization is also growing, investing, thinking about, what is the future. And so it is your job, that management of that scaling. I mean, you are overseeing that because I imagine that you've got plans. I mean, the goal is to really grow this, and we're seeing this huge market. Is that part of your charter? I mean, that's what you're looking at doing here.
Absolutely. We see enormous scale in our future. Right now, we're just based in Texas, but we'll expand quickly across the Sun Belt and then throughout the United States and ultimately internationally. So it's a very exciting time to be at Aurora. It's also a place where many different functions need to work together. So we have truck drivers working alongside robotics engineers, working alongside safety specialists, to name a few, and getting all of us to row in the same direction, operate with a cohesive culture is also something I see as fundamental to my role.
So why don't we start there? When we're thinking about such a diverse employee population, and I think a lot of folks who listen to the podcast have been or are in that like growth and trying to get it to work today as well as growing, and you've got all of this incredibly diverse employee population. You talk about working together. What is it that you are working on? How are you approaching this particular challenge?
Yeah, it's a multifaceted approach because I don't think there's any single arrow in the arsenal that can do the trick.
I would have been surprised if you're like, here is the answer.
Silver bullet on its way over. So, we find we have a mission first philosophy here. I mentioned our mission is to
Mhm.
bring the benefits of self-driving safely, quickly, and broadly, but everything we do is in the name of our mission. And so mission first is also our our approach to a hybrid work environment, where we have a lot of people on the ground, given the systems we're developing, the fact that we're on the roads in Texas, where in-person collaboration is fundamental. We also find when people are in person, there's a shared energy, and you also get to know each other just slightly differently. And I think on a deeper level when you're getting coffee together or going for a walk outside the offices. And so our hybrid work environment is one of the ways we're working to cement our culture. I would say a second avenue is through our values. We have 6 key values at Aurora. I'll just name a few of them, but focus for impact is one, operate with integrity is another. The one I like the most is no jerks. And so we work to live our values every day, and it's
Mhm.
shared values and behaviors that really over time cement our culture. And I'll just mention one third way we're doing this is through our annual engagement survey and semi-annual pulse survey to really understand both quantitatively and qualitatively how people are feeling and working across multiple dimensions.
So when we were talking before we got started, this really jumped out at me, this idea that your surveys, even as you grow to 2,000 employees and beyond, include a qualitative piece. Can you talk a little bit about what, like how it's relatively easy. It's not easy. It's easier when you're smaller. Qualitative, I think I find very compelling. But as you scale, that's it's the audacity that to continue to ask those questions. It seems like even though I think you and I believe in the power of it, it seems like a burden. I would imagine a lot of organizations, and I've seen them sort of just say, well, let's just do the quantitative. Can you talk a little bit about why you kept that in and how you're approaching qualitative and analyzing this, all these words?
Yeah, thanks for asking. I find the qualitative information as important, if not more important, than the quantitative. We find people respond slightly differently to numerical questions versus free form. And I've done this as long as I can remember, but I read every single word, always have. I think it makes me a better leader. I still old fashioned, but I print it out and I reserve a weekend and I go through all the comments. Even though that's not scalable, I can't get every employee and every leader to read all of the comments. I find that insight to be tremendous. And so a lot of the work we're doing is how do we synthesize the qualitative findings, those patterns that we're seeing in those words, and disseminate them on a broader basis. And there's many different opportunities. I've seen word clouds. I don't there Chat GPT actually does an amazing job. We haven't used
Yeah.
it in our surveys yet, given the confidentiality of those. But there are now with AI ways to get shortcut insights that weren't possible before. Personally, I still find value in every single sentiment, but I imagine over time that won't be possible. And so these new technologies that are out there really pave the way for gaining that qualitative insight in ways that weren't possible before.
Hmm. Um, so i- in um in addition to your own reading through each of these, which is obviously the highest fidelity, which is great, but it is probably unrealistic. And eventually it will become unrealistic for you. What are the other ways that you are uh, getting that information, or other people on your team, or how might you do it in the future? I mean, is there some other way that you're doing it now? And what have you found to be useful? And in a is I think my question is it as effective? Like, do you get 80% of the value, another assessment style or way to gather that data as you would just reading through it? I think is the core of my question.
Yeah, I do. And I think this is the beauty of marrying quantitative information with qualitative information. The quantitative data will tell you where the hotspots are, either where things are going particularly well or particularly poorly. And so you can force rank and you can actually extract the answers where people are feeling fine. And maybe not bother reading those, and really focus on what are our really bright spots. What are people saying? What words are they using when they're particularly energized and motivated? What can we learn from that? I think that's as important as like, hey, these people seem unhappy in these key areas, or they're alerting us to something that's not visible. Let's go read what they have to say there. I take it one step further, and I believe I've developed a bit of a reputation for my listening tours. I will go and actually have conversations as well, because one line or one sentence will clue you in, but I see it a little bit in my job to be a bit of a detective as well, and understand what's underneath that, because so many times you can misdefine or incorrectly define the problem, and then you're off solving something that's not even a real issue. You haven't gotten to the root of it yet.
Mm, mm,
So I think that the bridge, the answer is you start with a quantitative, you go into the formulaic quantitative, and then you have to do the real work as a leader to uncover the truth through a conversation, or several conversations. I would say dozens of conversations.
mm. Well, I'm thinking about, and I've been getting into writing my own AI bots recently, and I'm just thinking about where the chat GPT of it all can work harder, and where it can't. Because to me, it's like if I were to write a GPT for this, I could upload all of the surveys and say, hey, when you find a hotspot, define hotspot, hot or cold, or whatever it might be, automatically surface some of that language for me. And then then at least you have that, like, oh, you don't have, you're skipping a step maybe, but you're saying in addition, actually, that's just almost a clue. You're like, and I'm developing a hypothesis, or
That's
it
correct.
sounds like that's what you
Yeah.
do. And then you go chase it down. Is that the correct? Am I reading that correctly?
Absolutely. I love the you use the word hypothesis. I use that all the time. And I grew up in a consulting world where we called it answer first, where you presuppose what the answer is, but then like a scientist, you go chase it down if it's true or not. And I
Mm,
would say, I'm getting pretty good at this. 80% of the time, my hypothesis is correct, but I leave it open that 20% of the time that I've misdiagnosed the problem, and I
mm.
owe it to the people, to the culture, to Aurorans, to make sure that we're solving the right issue, the root of the issue that's really causing people consternation.
Um, ha have you seen a um change or response in the employee population when they become aware that you're actually listening? This is my working hypothesis, right? You're like, it's really important, right? People love to be listened to, or to be heard. So do you see that? Like, and how is it only when you're like, hey, knock, knock, knock. It's me. I saw that you said this in the survey, and they go, "Oh my gosh, she's reading it." It's like, or do other people go, "Oh, I know that she's actually listening." Like, what is that kind of response? When does it happen? And what is the output, or what is the result?
Yeah, so two reactions to that. The surveys are anonymous, so we don't know who said what. So
Uh-huh.
we actually
Okay.
we have
Fair.
to guess where it came from. We know largely departments, I guess. So we can dig in by department or by theme. It makes the mystery a little bit more interesting. And I would say the listening tour remains just the front end of the equation. What I mean by that is that's information gathering. The best leaders make decisions and they act. And so if all you're doing is absorbing information, you haven't defined your job correctly. I think when people actually appreciate the time and are willing to share and recommit to participating in those surveys is when they see real action, decisions, and change come
Oh,
from them.
okay.
And that's the harder part of the job.
I see. So okay. So then, hey, and this is kind of the standard, like you can't just collect the information. If you do and then don't do anything, then no one's going to give you that. It's a waste of their time. So when you act, are you communicating when you make a choice based on this analysis? Are you saying, because of what I learned through qualitative, quantitative, listening tours, we are making this choice? Are you making that explicitly a connection?
We're trying to. We're trying to, and we're trying to take it even a step further. We're using this nomenclature internally to talk about types of issues. It, we, and I nomenclature, it tends to be processes, systems, procedures, the more systematic way of doing things. A we is something that involves communication, softer skills, cultural issues, and then an I are sort of individual skills, individual motivation, things that might affect an individual per se, but is kind of isolated.
Mm,
So as we detect issues, we try to categorize them into it, we, and I, and that shared vocabulary also orients us, that especially as a largely engineering based culture and company, not everything can be solved through systems and processes. A lot can,
a
but
lot.
so, so much is also communication and trust and behaviors and those intangibles, right? And then we can't remove ourselves or us as individuals from any of these equations. And so we
Yeah.
talk about it a little bit like that. And then we also, I try to differentiate the listening tours from the, hey, now we're acting. And disagree and commit is a very famous line, but what we're using internally is sensing and seeking sessions. So
Hmm.
these are areas where we aren't solving or starting. That's the other type of conversation we'd have, but we're really just listening, because sometimes people can get very frustrated. Is all you're doing is information gathering. Things aren't moving fast enough. Why are you spending all this time asking
Yep.
all these questions?
Yep.
But if you name the meeting as such and you say, this is the stage of information gathering we're in, you get a lot more collective understanding. And then there has to be, hey, and by the way, this is a solving meeting and this is a starting meeting. This is
Yeah.
now we're ready to take action. And even if it's not your decision, you've had a chance to voice your opinion, and we're moving forward because we have to, because decisions and momentum define organizations.
Okay, so a clarifying question. So sensing and seeking, is that one type of meeting?
So we in our nomenclature, yes, we call it sensing and seeking.
Okay.
Technically, they can be differentiated. Sensing is much more amorphous, where you're really trying to define the problem still, and then seeking is okay. You've kind of named the problem, and you're seeking out very much more specific
Right.
information.
Right.
Which is fine for expediency. We combine the two.
And then starting and solving, are those one or those two?
Those can be two. Solving is where you're looking for recommendations and really looking for a plan forward, but haven't made a decision yet. And then starting is, okay, this decision's been made. Let's go for it.
Okay, so the order is sensing, seeking, solving, starting.
Yeah. And I
Nice.
think the attributes to that go to a man by the name of Chris Holmberg, who's been a consultant for us, but we've really appreciated his counsel.
Well, this is, I think both with that and the it, we, and I, this is just spot on I mean, I think as a consultant, I might say framing, but as a human, I might say communication. And the way that we talk about and categorize and articulate what we're doing is as important as almost as important as what we're doing, because, and this goes back to the original question, your population needs to have a sense of awareness about about this whole organization that they're working within. And I feel like what the problem with large organizations is that folks get really disconnected. And so by describing it in this way, you're bringing the you are at you're using language, and putting the effort into describing it and then communicating it to employees. And that way they feel like not just awareness, but like some contribution to the system. Does that, I'm just kind of making it
We
up
hope
as I
so.
go,
We
but
absolutely hope that's the case. It doesn't feel right to me to speak on behalf of our employees in terms of how they are feeling, but that is absolutely the intent. And I often say that the largest issue a leader can face is to become disconnected from the people who are doing the work. And so I try very hard to spend a lot of my time listening to anyone who feels they have something relevant to say, regardless of
Mhm.
where they sit in the org or their level. Everyone has an important perspective that we need to incorporate into our decision making.
How do you make yourself available? Um, I mean, you can say it, hey, send me an email or something, but what are the ways that you're communicating that?
Yeah, so we have lots of wonderful forums at Aurora for that. So every 2 weeks we host an intersection. Other companies might call it an all hands. We call it an intersection, given our
Love good branded language.
yeah. And within that, not only do we try to showcase some of the findings and decisions and progress that we're making, but we also have an open Q&A in that broader forum. As I mentioned, we also do repeated listening tours, depending on the topic of the day.
Mhm.
Uh, and I offer, as I speak to people, to grab time. Sometimes people just need 15 minutes. I'll give you a very specific example. We have a wonderful, talented manager on our team, and she's managing a number of our truck drivers and field operations. And she herself does not have a commercial driver's license, a CDL. I do. I ended up getting one when I joined Aurora. So she asked me, "Hey, do you think I should get a CDL? Do you think I should go through that process?" And it was a wonderful conversation. It lasted about 20 minutes. And I think we really, really connected. But I'm just so glad we have the kind of culture where she felt like she could reach out and we could compare notes on something that was clearly top of mind for her.
That's great. So we've been talking a lot about your approach, and there's a lot of influence that you have as the president. How do you um, communicate or um, share with your leadership team, the C-suite, the executives, that sentiment? I mean, there's the things that you care about, but we all care about different things. I can imagine, and I don't know anybody on your team, but I can imagine, having interacted with many executives over my career, that there's some that are just like, I just don't have the time to, for example, sit down for 20 minutes, right? So are you actively sharing that, like, this is an important priority to be able to listen to, or is this your particular thing and you're not going to be you're not necessarily expecting your team to do it this way?
Yeah, I feel blessed that we have an incredible culture. I was taught to think about culture as what you do when no one is looking. And that means I'm having these meetings without necessarily telling people about it, right? Like I'm not doing this
Mm,
for any other reason than for the individual who requested the time and hopefully for the sake of the organization broadly. But what also defines a culture is that it's not just a person doing it, but that the collective body is kind of working in the same way. And so I'm so delighted that the executive team at Aurora, I think, feels very similarly and make time for people and development and questions and concerns. And we see that as part and parcel to our job here. So that makes my role easy.
yeah.
I part of the reason I joined Aurora is because I saw that across the
Mm.
leadership.
Yeah. So it's self-selecting, right? That's the power of a great culture. And that's wonderful that you found yourself in that way. And I would probably wager a guess that there's some modeling going on too. They're watching that and, looking to you, how this is how OSA's doing it. And so maybe that's what I should be doing too, or they probably have the tendency to. I just think a lot about, and the reason why I asked that question, I think a lot about that kind of codification of what our expectations are. And as we grow an organization, how do you get that information out back to that communication point? And so here you have a relatively small team, right? Your executive team, you have direct contact with them. And so you have the opportunity to just model that behavior. And they happen to be the kind of folks that are of like minds. Is that, is that,
Yeah, that resonates a lot. And I think about a saying that I heard in my early 20s. It's really stuck with me. Uh, you can't say, I don't have time for that. You can only say, I haven't prioritized that. And I think when you put that perspective on things, what are you prioritizing? My number one job is to, well, our customers certainly, we haven't talked externally yet, but our customers and our people, those
yeah.
two things rise to the top of my calendar every single day. It's also very energizing, right?
Mm,
When you get that right and you realize that you're influencing, hundreds, in our case, thousands of people and customers, and ultimately, how the world is living. It's a very motivating place to work because you actually feel like you're making a difference.
that's great. Well, I think that's a wonderful place. I think we'll leave it there. Ossa Fisher, president of Aurora Innovations, a leader in self-driving technology, vehicle technology, if I can say that. Aurora.tech, if you're interested in learning more. Hey, Osa, it was really wonderful to have you on. Thank you for sharing so much about your process, and I'm excited to see the scaling journey that you all are on.
Thanks. I had a great time. Really enjoyed it.